Another great power of any programming language is the ability to evaluate data and take action based off of that data. We do this by using conditional statements. Let's take a look at that. The first we've seen a bit of already, and it's called the if and if-else conditional statements. They're formatted just like this.
We do the lowercase keyword if, followed by an open paren, then the actual condition, whatever that might be, then close the parens.
This is whatever we're going to use to test to see if something is true or false or equates to a particular value. So any condition you want to pass here would go inside of the open and closed parentheses.
Open up a curly brace. Inside here would be any of our code that we want to run directly underneath. And then when we're done, we close the parentheses. So that way it would be if whatever condition is equal to true, so on and so forth, then the code inside of these two curly braces would be what we want to run.
We can further extend this by using else and else if. Let's take a look at more of those conditional statements.
Same as before for the if, lowercase if, open and close parenthesis, and the question mark would be for whatever condition that is. Then open up our curly braces and then close our curly braces just like before. Anything inside of this would run if that if statement is true. Then right afterwards we can say else if, all lowercase, all one word, open and close a parenthesis again, and then a condition in there would run if the first condition was not met. So open and close our curly braces, and then this code would run here. And finally, if neither one of these were to match, but yet we still wanted to do something by default, we would just use the keyword else. And then open curly braces and close, and then this code here. This does not need any kind of conditional statements because it is an automatic if the other two conditions are not met.
Let's head over to Workspaces and look at the conditional statements in code. We're also going to see another one called the switch case conditional.
Let's take a look at how we use conditionals in our code in some real-world examples. Let's clean up what we have here and create some things that we can use a little more real-world. So instead of year here, I'm actually going to say use full name as one. And we're going to say that I do want to use full name. So I'm going to make that a Boolean true. Okay. And then my job title will be teacher. I will leave max badges alone for now. Actually, let's not make this a constant. Let's get rid of that. All right, save this. Get rid of some of this excess stuff. Leave first name, leave last name, leave location. And then I'm going to give myself a role and say my role here is a teacher. Okay. All right, get rid of this part here. I'm actually going to eliminate full name. We're going to actually do this with a conditional. So get rid of all of this and start with a conditional statement called an if statement. So what we use if statements for is control flow of our program. So as we're going from top to bottom in our program, as we're processing the PHP code, we might want to test some things. And we test those by using conditionals, saying if something is true or if something is equal to something else, then we're going to execute the code contained inside of an if statement. Otherwise, we're going to do something, say, continue on, do some default behavior, or exit the program, maybe deliver an error. If statements are a very powerful thing inside of PHP. So let's start with our first conditional if, and we're going to find out if we're going to use our full name and then create that name in code. So we'll start with the keyword if. Immediately after the if, you're going to open and close parentheses. Now, this is where you're going to actually test your condition. So in here will be your conditional. After that, you're going to open up curly braces on the same line, then go down 2 lines and close the curly brace. So here we'll have a conditional. Now, the conditional that we're going to test against, is to find out if we want to use our full name. So we'll say if use full name, and then we'll say is equal, remember the equals operator, true. Okay, so if it is equal to true, we want to execute the code contained within this area here. So run this code if use full name is true. Okay, if it's not true, it's actually going to skip this code and just jump down to the next line, which in our case would be line 13 or 14. But we want to use our full name, and if we do want to use our full name, we're going to have to create the name. So the variable that we use in our code, as you see here on line 21, is name. Same thing here, h1 in line 30, we use name. So eventually we're going to have to set a variable called name. So far it's not set at all. So we're going to set this equal to Hampton Paulk, which would be the combination of my first name and my last name. We're going to use what we've done before, which is our string concatenation operator, and we'll say the first name. Okay, and then we're going to do a concatenate, and we're going to add a single space in between the two, and then add a concatenation operator again, and then the last name. Close that statement with a semicolon. So if use full name is true, as our conditional says, then we're going to create the name variable with first name and concatenating with the last name and putting a space in between. Let's save this and see if it does what we expect. Okay, so here we've got some cleanup to do. We've got our booleans from previous, so we'll actually go into our code and remove that. So we'll go ahead and get rid of all of this information that was in here. In fact, we're not going to need any of this for right now. Save it, go back over, refresh. Okay, so it's still using Hampton Paulk, and it's using it as my full name. So what happens if I change my constant from true to false? I'm going to hit save, go back and hit refresh. Now, if you notice, there's no name. So why is that? Let's look at our code. In our code, we find out if use full name is equal to true. Well, it's not. It's equal to false. We define that on line 2 in our constant. So then we create the name variable inside of line 11. Well, we're not going to hit line 11 because use full name is set to false. So that means we need to either define name above on line 9 or somewhere above line 10, 11, and 12, or we can extend our if statement with an else statement. So after our if, after our curly brace, we'll simply say the keyword else. Now, else has no arguments whatsoever. It has no conditions. It's always going to run as long as the if statement is not valid. So we'll do $name is equal to just the first name. Close it with a semicolon. Hit save, go back over, and hit refresh. So now it's using just Hampton. So you might wonder, why do we need to use an else statement? Why can't we just define name is first name as long as this doesn't run? Well, that's a good question. So if we were to say if it's not equal to true, so it's false, then we're going to go down and it's just going to run line 14 and make name equal to first name. Let's see if that works as we expect. It does. Okay, so why can't we just do this? Well, what if I was to change this to true? Hit save, switch back over, and refresh. But yet it's still just using my first name. Well, that's because the way that the order of operation works here is we're going to hit line 10 and we're going to hit this conditional statement which says use full name true. Well, it will be equal to true. So then it will run the code here on line 11 where it sets name equal to the first name and the last name. But after it's done setting it, it's just going to jump down to line 13 and then line 14, where line 14 we assign name variable to first name. So it doesn't matter that we've set it on line 11, it's going to override it on line 14. So that's why we need to use our else statement. So we'll go ahead and add that back in here, else, open up our curly braces, bring this in, and then close our curly braces. So we'll save this, we'll do our refresh, and now it should be using the full name, which it is.